a few problems. Okay. I'm just writing a little message in the chat here. Okay, so basically, I have been doing virtually everything possible to mess up the timing with time zones and me rescheduling and so on and so forth. So anyway, I hope everyone's doing well. I see we have a bunch of people already on, and I'm really glad that you guys are here. So this is a webinar about, and I'm not exactly sure how to call it. I've come up with a few different names. So for now, I'm calling it Better Technical Training. And why better? Because anyone can do it, but you can do it better. And hopefully I'll give you some hints and advice and thoughts on how to do that. So let me see. I'm going to move. How many said they were going to show? I think we had a total of 12 or 15 registered. And it's typical for people, not everyone to show up to such a thing. Whoops, let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of a few things on my screen here, and then I can share my screen as well. By the way, so just so you know, those of you who are new to this kind of thing, so I'm using Google Hangouts on Air for the webinar, and that means that basically means that what was I going to say? It takes about 15 seconds between the time that I broadcast and the time that you actually view it. So let me actually make sure that everyone has the link here, event page. I'm going to put this in. All right. You can use. Okay, so hopefully people can then use that and see that and enjoy that. I don't know exactly why, but I see that there's 0 people watching, but I'm not sure if I totally believe that. Anyway, so this is a webinar about technical training. Let's see what people are. Yeah, well, hopefully, can people see me? Can people hear me? I'll have to wait a few moments to find out if there's an answer because of that 15-second delay or so. So if people see me and hear me, let me know. I see a whole bunch of names that I recognize in the chat, so let me know where you guys are from and how ridiculously late or early you're getting up to listen to me, which I obviously appreciate. All right, so I'm going to take a look here as well. Oh, my goodness, and more people looking to come. All right, let's see. Oh, goodness. Let me just join us. Tell us the other person there. Okay. So I don't know how many people are actually watching now. 0 viewers. All right. I am going to give this a few more moments to actually start so that we don't totally ignore everyone. Let's take a look here as well. Now, the only problem with these Hangouts on Air is that when they become YouTube videos, then everyone can see. Yeah, everyone can see everything. Let's see. Yeah, I'll do that there. The whole thing becomes, on a YouTube video. So people watching this on YouTube are going to see something super exciting right now. Why is this? It says live. Share that. Okay, I don't know why. It's a little confused right now. This is started. Okay. Is anyone here? Is any? Share this. It's working. Oh, I see. Oh, we do have a 3. Looks like we have 3 people watching, so that's good. Okay, so I'm actually going to start, despite the fact that it says 0 here, because it's just a bug, I guess, in Google Hangouts. And I'm going to start, and we'll take it from there. I'm not seeing anything via Hangouts. Oh. Let me restart then. Wait a second, what's going on here? That's very strange. Michael, oh. I'm going to restart this. Okay. Doug, do you see it? Let's see. Maybe. I don't know. Very interesting. What if I refresh that? A fuzzy image. A fuzzy video image. Right. I mean, if I move, do you see me fuzzy like that? Oh, this is so exciting. Technology says if I, quit and re-enter. Okay. All right. Yeah, basically what happened was I was planning to start this originally at midnight Israel time. That changed to be 1 a.m. Israel time. But I wanted to put it in GMT, and GMT is, of course, so GMT, it's still Wednesday. In Israel, it's Thursday. And every time I was switching time zones, Eventbrite got crazy, and then Google got crazy. Of course, it's probably my fault for not keeping. Oh, thank you. Okay, excellent. I'm happy that this finally worked. Okay, and yeah, I like the bookshelves too. I love my books, although unfortunately some of them are going out of date. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do screen sharing now, so you can see the slides that I prepared. I'm going to keep the chat window open, but because this 15-second delay between the time that I talk and you actually see it, which is sort of this weird artifact of Google Hangouts, Hangouts on Air, so we might just sort of have this little delayed ping pong. But I definitely encourage questions and answers. And I'm using a photo booth on the Mac so that you can see me as well. So let's see how this is going to work. I just need to go into Hangouts. Oh, I see. I need to go to the Hangouts thing and choose Screen Share, which is this guy. I want to share that. Start it. So now, good. So now you guys should all be seeing me and my slides, hopefully. Let's hope. All right. So this is a webinar, as I said, that I'm calling Better Technical Training. And if people have better names, better suggestions, I'm open to them. And the basic idea is I want to introduce people to the world of technical training. I want to teach you sort of how it works from a business perspective, how it works from a logistical perspective, and how it even works from a pedagogical perspective. And I'll give you some background on what I do and how I do it. And I've decided over the last month or two that I love what I do. I really feel fortunate. I'm going to describe a little bit sort of what my background is and how I got into all of this. But I really feel like I've been very fortunate to find something in my career that is just so incredibly satisfying. I get to meet lots of really smart people around the world. I get to know that I'm helping them out. And I reduce a lot of the stress having to do with being, consultant and developer. And I think get paid well. So, it's a great deal all around. And I feel like I want to help people who are interested in doing this. I want to tell you how it works, tell you how you can sort of get in on it. I started doing some coaching for people who are sort of more advanced. But from my perspective, this webinar is sort of a good way for me to reach out to more people and get them excited. And if you get excited about it, that's great. And I'd love to get feedback on what people think about this, because I've started writing an ebook on this subject. And basically the subjects that I'm going to present here tonight are going to appear in various ways in that ebook. So feedback is very, very welcome. All right, so what are we going to talk about? So first of all, a little bit of background about myself. And this is sort of the standard thing that I tell people in classes that I take. So I've been a programmer and a consultant and developer for a long time now. You can see the increasingly gray hair demonstrates it's been a long time, for about 20 years or so. I mean, I graduated from college in 1992, which is shockingly long ago, I guess. And I was working as a developer. I worked at HP, I worked at Time Warner, and then I moved to Israel in 1995 and wasn't really sure what I was going to do. I decided to go into consulting. So I opened my consulting business and was doing development in a variety of open source technologies. And along the way, and I'll just mention, like, I'm a columnist at Linux Journal. I got a PhD last year in learning sciences from Northwestern, which actually is increasingly relevant to what I do and how I do it. And you'll see more about that in a little while. So anyway, my story is I was doing development, and increasingly companies would come to me and say, so we like the development that you're doing. Would you mind teaching us how to do what you're doing? And I was like, oh, sure, that was great. That would be great. And I started giving sort of lectures. I started doing more and more of it. I really enjoyed it. But it was only after, I guess, in the last few years, as I was finishing my PhD, and I spoke with a training company, I started doing it more and more. The story is basically I contacted them and said I'd like to do Ruby training and Ruby on Rails. And they said, oh, that's interesting. That's nice. Send us your resume. I sent them my resume, and within a few hours, they emailed me back and said, oh my God, Python. We definitely need someone to teach Python. And so I have been teaching Python probably about twice a month for the last 5-6 years. And I've expanded as well. I do other training as well. I do training in Ruby and Git and PostgreSQL. I've started doing regular expressions. To a point where now basically 80%, let me see if it's on my next slide even, about 80%, and I'll get to that in a little while. Yeah, about 80% of my time has been spent doing technical training. And what does that mean? That means that I spend about 4 days each week, most weeks during the month. My classes are typically 4 days long, so I can do that 4 days a week. And I go to companies and I meet with a group of programmers, anywhere between, say, 5 and 20 of them at a time, sometimes even 30 in a really big group under unusual circumstances. And I teach them to do what I know how to do. I teach them how to program. I teach them how to use data structures. I teach them how to use algorithms. And it's a wide variety of courses that I teach. It's probably wider than it should be. But that's what I do. Now, do I also do development? I can talk about this a little bit more later. Yeah, I'm doing development. I'm the CTO of a company in the US. It's a part-time thing, but I am. I do development on my own. I'm constantly exploring and trying new things. So it's not like I'm not doing day-to-day development, but I'm not doing it for other people nearly as much as I used to. And I'm a happy guy, right? The consulting world is like the programming world, but then you have to add in the business side. And so I used to have all these arguments, and sometimes it was an argument, sometimes it was just disagreement, sometimes it was just uncomfortable about, schedules, product scope, cost overruns. A client would come to me and say, you billed me how much for this? This took twice as long as you estimated, and so on and so forth. And it was kind of frustrating for everyone. And here I feel like I'm going in and I'm helping companies to be better at what they do. I'm making them faster, more efficient, smarter, more profitable, right? I am basically increasing the bottom line of these companies by making their programmers more effective. I'm helping people to be better at their jobs and helping them with their careers as well. And as a result of doing a lot of this training, I now have companies that come to me and they ask me for courses. So I really don't have to reach out to companies very much anymore and say, hey, would you be interested in a course? Rather, I've gotten to the point where companies call me up and say, when is the next time you can provide us with a course? And I will typically say to them, oh, that'll be 3 or 4 months from now, or even 6 months from now, because I'm so incredibly booked. I had a company that asked me for a PostgreSQL course, and they said, when's the earliest you can give it to us? And I said, how about March of next year? And they were a little hesitant and frustrated, but that's the earliest that I was able to give it to them. And then I actually had an opening, and I called them up, and I said, so how'd you like to have it in late October, which is like next week? And they said, actually, we're having budget problems. We can't do it right now. But in theory, they would have been happy to do that. And quite frankly, the pay is pretty good, too. And I'll talk about the pay in a little while. But the story that I've been telling people recently is that I was on the train and I ran to a colleague of mine who's a programmer, and he was asking me what I'm doing. And I said, oh, I'm doing mostly technical training now. And he said, oh, yeah, that's great because, it's you just work, regular day, and, they pay you. You have to argue about scope, all the things that I mentioned so far. He said, yeah, it's just sort of a shame that they don't pay you as well as programming. Well, here's the dirty little secret, folks. It pays better than programming. Shockingly, but it does. Now, it requires, of course, that you be a good programmer, or I don't know even how good. It requires that you be a good programmer, and it requires that you be able to teach and lecture in front of people and so forth. But if you can pull it off, then actually you can have a very nice career, good paying one, flexible, and as I said, meeting lots of great people all over the world, lots of the time. So what is my basic agenda for today for this webinar? So first of all, just to sort of give you an overview, what is technical training? What is this field? How do the companies work? How does this training business work at all behind the scenes? And then I'm going to introduce some of the stuff that I learned in my PhD coursework and beyond. How can learning sciences, which is the field that I learned, and just so you know, learning sciences is a relatively new field, and it's not just a fancy way of saying education, although it could be. But learning sciences is sort of looking at cognitive science. How do people think? What does science know about that? And looking at design, and looking at computer science, and seeing how we can combine these to help people learn better. And so how can I take what learning sciences has taught me and turn it into a better, better way for people to learn? And then really whatever questions you have and answers I can provide, I would be happy to do that. And this is the first of many things I'm planning to do, I should say, on the training front. As I said, I'm working on this ebook. I'm probably going to start a podcast in the next month or two about technical training. I'm probably going to try to do an online conference in a number of months about technical training. I have a whole lot of things set up for people who are interested in this. And my goal is to sort of help people understand the business and help people understand the logistics and help people understand the pedagogy. How do you teach effectively so that people can get better and better and better at doing this? Okay, so let's start off with like, what is technical training? And this might be really obvious. Excuse me for a second. This might be really, really obvious, but the high-tech world moves really fast. I mean, it's amazing that so many of the technologies that I learned when I was in college are still applicable in any way whatsoever, because so much of it is just out of date and has flown out the window and is no longer, is really passé. And this means that every high-tech company, and even many companies that are not high-tech, many companies that just use technology, know that they need to teach their people. They need to constantly be teaching their people new technologies. Now, it's kind of funny because, like, how do I learn these new things? Well, I go and I read books, right? You see the books behind me. I read books, I read blogs, I do experiments. And so that's how I learn. I'm not going to any classes to learn this stuff. So why don't other people do this? And many people just can't do it themselves. And some of them, I would say even most of them, are smart, but they don't have the time, right? If you're working a full-time job and you have kids and you have a mortgage and you have on and on, you really don't have time to just sort of start learning a programming language in depth for work. And at work, where they might want you to learn it, they just don't have the time to give to you. And certainly the learning curve can take a long time in many places. Some people don't have the discipline, right? It's easier to go into a classroom and be fed it and have to do exercises. And some of them don't have the experience you need in order to learn new things. It's almost like the more you learn, the easier it is. The more things you learn, the easier it is to learn them. So, you know, after a while, it gets easier to learn these programming languages. So most of these companies will bring in trainers to help their people. And this is a huge, huge, huge industry, right? Now, you could argue that companies have people in-house doing this, and some companies do. But that's usually for the basic things, or for technologies that they've done in-house, or just for like 1 hour, 2 hour, maybe even 4 hour seminars. Teaching a full 1 week course is typically something that they're going to outsource to other people. So just as an example, so I taught a course in Python at HP in Romania. I guess it was about 3-4 years ago. And this is actually typical, where like 2/3 of the people in this advanced Python course, you know, what were they doing in an advanced Python course? They heard that Python was a great language to learn. I was like, you know, that's not exactly what the advanced course is for. And I was told by the training manager there, and I'll talk about that in a moment, the training manager basically said, ignore the people who don't know Python. We only offer advanced courses here because the basic courses are available in video from what they call HP University. How you can join from mobile, I assume on the Hangout. Okay, hope that's helpful, Jen. Anyway, what did I want to say? So yeah, so a lot of these places will not bring in an external person so that they can do training for basic stuff, only for advanced stuff. But this leaves a huge amount of stuff for which they have no internal training. So a lot of it is done by external contractors or companies. Now, so what do I mean by training here? And I really want to focus a little more. I'm talking about live lectures and lessons. Right? I'm talking about someone sort of doing what I'm doing now, talking live. All right, I'm not talking about pre-recorded videos, although a lot of training is that. I'm not talking about just shared slide decks, although a lot of it is that. And I'm not even talking about books. Now, all these are really good. I can really talk about what I've done so far, although I'm looking to expand as well. So anyway, so I'm going to talk about what I know, and as I expand into new things, I'm going to help people with that as well. Now, you should just know training is massive, massive, massive business, right? So the numbers that I've seen are that just 2 years ago, training was $141 billion. Now, this is for all sorts of training. I just met someone 2 days ago, yesterday, 2 days ago, who does training. And what kind of training do they do? For factories to increase their safety. So this is included in training, right? And I'm not doing factory safety training. I'm doing technical training. So you have to cut that down by a fair amount to deal with just high-tech companies and just software stuff. But these numbers are rising, and high-tech companies are known for investing a lot in training. Why? Because high-tech moves so quickly. And so they're going to spend a ton per person. And not all this is for frontal lectures, right? So training might include all sorts of other things, but that's okay. So there are companies that specialize in training, right? There are companies that specialize. You have Ruby on Rails dev shops, and you have IT shops that do your system administration for you. And you have lots of different kinds of companies. You have training companies as well, and you can go and work for such companies. Now, the good news in these cases is they take care of marketing, sales, negotiations. They take care of everything. You basically show up, teach, and leave. And if you do a good job, then you will show up and teach and leave again many more times, because it's in everyone's interest. You get paid, and the training company gets paid. And the other good news is they can probably supply you with work pretty quickly. If you are good at what you do and you're interested in training for them, you go to them and say, listen, I know technology X. Would you please find me courses for it? And if they like you, they will find you a course, possibly within weeks. And if you, so the bad news is they take a lot of the money. They take a lot of the money. Just like, I'll give you 2 examples, and these might be extreme examples, but I was speaking to one company that I know of about doing some training for them with people in the US and Europe. And I'll show you in a moment how much you can make there if you're doing it on your own. And they basically wanted to take something like 70% of the money for themselves. Now, they are nice people. They're good people. They have a great business. They do a lot of work. They do all those things. But if I'm working on my own, I'm going to make a lot more. And I had an even worse experience in Israel with a training company with whom I've worked, where they took like 90% or 80% of the money from a certain kind of course. The other thing about working for a training company, the other bad news is they'll often have a non-compete clause. So let's say you say, I want to get into training, but I first want to do it through a training company because they'll deal with the nitty-gritty. And then after 3 months, 6 months, a year, I'll just do it on my own. You have to be really careful about that, because many times they'll sign you on a contract that says you cannot compete with them at all, or more likely, you can't go into any of the companies where you went already. So if you're teaching at, Google, for an example, which I doubt they have much external training actually, but I could be wrong. If you do training at Google through a training company, you can't go back to Google on your own for some sort of cooling off period. And so you really want to be careful both about the company with whom you work and what companies you go into if you're working through them. So I'm not really talking about training companies here, but many of the things that I'm going to talk about here are applicable if you're working with a training company. It's just a different set of trade-offs. And not everyone is interested in dealing with these business things, right? Let's face it, many people, if you're a technical trainer and you're really good at that, you might just want to show up every day and teach, in which case a training company might not be a bad way to go. But I'm going to talk about some other things here. So if you're doing it yourself, right, if you're a consultant of any sort, you're probably used to dealing with companies. But training is a little different because, first of all, you're pitching a product, not a service. Typically, consultants come in and say, I can help you with X. I will help you to optimize your software. I will help you build something. But it's very hard to give a hard and fast number on what's the price going to be or what's the time going to be, because you're offering them a service. Here, you're pitching a product. I will come in and I will give you this course. You will pay X for the course. You will get Y from the course, and that's that. It's like buying a computer, buying anything else. You're pitching typically to non-technical people. So if you're a consultant, typically, I mean, not always, you'll often go and pitch to the CEO, but then you need to sort of get vetted by the CTO or by the developers, and you're dealing with the technical people day to day. In this case, you're pitching to definitely non-technical people who are the training managers. And again, I'll talk about them in a little bit. The budgets also work very differently. If you're doing a development task, then this is part of their product development budget. And it's like a finite sum. If they've gotten an investment, they can spend so much on development. If they haven't got an investment, if they're just profitable, they can spend a different amount on development. But like if your development takes twice as long, then that's taking away from the budget. And so the budgets for training actually work differently because it's typically per person or per division or per quarter. And they have to spend it on something. And so why not spend it on your training? And the feedback you get and the opportunities you get are different. So if you're doing, if you're doing a course, then the feedback you're going to get is not on how great a programmer you are. It's going to be how well did you deliver that course. And if you did a good job of delivering that course, that training manager is evaluated on how many good courses they brought in. So how do you make the training manager look good? You give them a good course. You get good feedback. And if you get good feedback, then the training manager wants to continue to get patted on the back by their boss. And so they'll invite you back to do more courses. And it just sort of feeds on itself, a very strong positive feedback loop. Now, can you do this? The answer is probably yes. Almost certainly yes, I'm guessing. Many, many, many people can train. Now, it's not for everyone, right? You need the technical chops. You need to be able to do the programming. And you also need an ability to teach, to stand up in front of people and talk and not get embarrassed, and to spend time honing your teaching ability, right? And I'll tell you, I've been doing this for years, and yet it's so clear to me that a class that I've taught 20 times is way smoother and way better than a class I'm teaching for the first or second time. I just started teaching courses in regular expressions about, I guess, 2 or 3 months ago. And I've been teaching regular expressions off and on over the years as part of other programming courses, but this was a full 2-day course in the sub. No, 2-day course? Yeah, 2-day course in regular expressions. And it actually went very well. I was very pleasantly surprised, but it still was, sort of rusty in some places. Now, you also need to realize that you're going to have to improve, and you're going to improve over time. That's true in all jobs, but here it's a very public thing, right? If you are improving as a software developer, then your code will get better, and your work group will know that. But if you're improving as a teacher, then you're doing it sort of like in front of other people as you go. Now, here's the other thing. Many people say, really, like, can I do training? And I say, think about it. You probably are really good at 1 or 2 technologies, maybe even more. How many people know the technology as well as you do? And they were like, oh, well, lots of people know it better than me. And like, okay, but of those people, how many of them are available during the day to teach? And many of them have full-time jobs and thus are not available to do it. By the way, you can teach during the evenings as well. Typically, it doesn't pay as well, but you definitely can do that. Okay, so let's take a look now, right? And this training manager, this is the most important person to know about in an organization if you're going to do training. Most companies above a very small size have a training manager. Sometimes it's wrapped up with being the HR manager as well. Some places even have a whole training department, right? And this person coordinates training. They're not a technical person. They're a manager, and their job is to be a go-between between all the training companies they deal with and the people who need the training. They have to figure out who needs what, and they have to provide it to those. They find out which groups need what kind of training. They find out which companies offer which kinds of training, and they're matchmakers. This person is your primary contact for pitching to them, for coordinating, for budgeting, and for getting future work. This is your client. If you make the training manager happy, you will be invited back. Now, again, how does the training manager get happy? If your course is successful, if you get a positive feedback evaluation. Almost every company will have its own evaluation system. Some of them are better than others, but almost all of them basically say, what did you think of? And they have 10 different questions they'll ask about the content, about the delivery, about the materials, on and on. If you get a high score, then the training manager will look good because they brought in a good course, and the training manager that will then bring you back. You want to make the training manager happy, and you do not want to tick off the training manager. So this is like the main person you want to deal with. But the training manager is not technical, as I said, which means they can't really approve a syllabus, and they can't give you feedback on the content of your course. So they're going to act as a coordinator. So you talk to them and you say, listen, I am giving this course in, I don't know, Haskell, right? To pick something that no one's giving a course in any company that I know of, perhaps for good reason, right? So I want to give a course in Haskell. And the training manager says, oh, interesting, let me check to see if there's a need for that. And they'll go check, and they'll come back to you and say, well, we do, but we need it in this and this and this. And you negotiate, you go back and forth. And very often you'll have a phone call, like a conference call between the training manager and a technical person and you to figure out what should be in the syllabus. Now, sometimes after you get to know a company, they will come to you and they'll say, listen, we know that you teach Haskell. We need someone to teach Haskell for the web. Can you do that sort of training? And then you either say yes or you say no. By the way, if you're smart, you say yes, and then you work like the dickens to figure out how Haskell works on the web. I know it does, by the way. Now, the budgets, as I mentioned, budgets are weird in the training world because they budget for training, right? And you're not convincing them to give out money for you instead of an employee, right? So sometimes I've gone to companies, and the company says, well, we'd love to hire you as a consultant, but we can hire an employee for the same amount of money. Like for your week of work, we can hire someone for a whole month of work. So we're just going to go with a full-timer. That's not the case with training budgets. In the case of training budgets, they know they're going to be outsourcing. They know they're going to be finding someone. And so the money is there. The question is, are they going to choose you and your course or someone else and someone else's course? So you want to make sure that your syllabi, all right, and the syllabus is one of the most important documents you'll create. Make sure it matches the company's expectations. You want to know that the course is good for this company. And that's where this talking comes into play. If you just go to a company and say, here's my course, take it or leave it, it might succeed, but more likely you say, here is my outline for my generic course. How do you think we can improve it for you? Now, my favorite improvement that places ask for is to reduce the time involved, right? Because they're paying, and we'll talk about this in a moment, they're paying by the day and they're paying by the person, and their people are not working while they're in training. So it is so common for a company to say to me, well, we see that your training takes 4 days. Our people are smarter than average, and thus they only need 3 days. Right? Now, first of all, like, it's amazing how every company has smarter people than average. It's like the Lake Wobegon effect. But secondly, there are just some things you can't do in 3 days that you can do in 4. And almost all of my courses nowadays, the main programming courses are 4 days. And I tell people this. I say, look, that's just the way it is. And they sort of wrinkle their nose and they say, well, okay, if it needs to be 4 days. And they'll try and negotiate on other things, maybe on scope. But you want to make sure that they feel like they're getting a course that's special to them. And if they need special things, do it. Definitely do it. It's good for you because you get to learn new things and you get to add it to your material that you can then use later on and all sorts of other stuff. So how much money do you get? And this is actually shocking to people who are not in the training industry. First of all, it varies a huge amount by country and company, but let's cut to the chase. In Israel and in China, my impression is it works out to about $1,800 per day, maybe a bit more in China, but not a lot more. But in Europe, it can be about $5,000 a day. And in the US, it can be about $6,000 a day. Now, I must say, I have not yet done very much training in Europe or the US outside of other organizations, in the last few years. So these numbers are partly based on what I've gotten from other people and from negotiating with companies. So a company called me a few months ago in the US and asked me to do some training there. In the end, it did not work out because I was too busy and I couldn't offer them the dates that they needed, which was really a shame. And I checked with people I know, and they said, well, I'll talk about this in a moment also, but they said, you want to charge by the person by the day. And they said, you charge $300 per person per day, up to 20 people in the class, so that works out to $6,000 a day. So it's not necessarily a flat rate, but if they can get 20 people in the classroom, yeah, they'll pay that much. And I could not believe that this is what they were willing to pay. I spoke to the company in question in the US, and they did not blink at all when I gave them this figure. However, I couldn't make it, so I didn't get that. And in Europe, my impression is a bit lower, but not a lot lower. Israel and China, which are the places where I've taught also, I know the numbers there are a little better. China might be a little higher, but not much higher. But basically, in Israel, definitely it's on the order of like $1,800 a day, maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less. And by the way, right, it's not like I've done a huge survey in the field. This is what I found from my talking to a few companies with whom I've worked. You will probably find companies, I'm just going to assume, not having tested this, not having checked it, I'm going to assume that a company like a bank would pay more. They also might have lots and lots of special things. Oh, great question. So Derek asks, what's the kind of company that would purchase this kind of training? So I've typically been dealing with two kinds of companies over the last few years. One is huge, like multinationals. So I teach at Cisco, Apple, HP, VMware, EMC, those sorts of places. And they're going to have these sorts of budgets for their training divisions, or their training manager will have this available. However, not if you have a medium-sized or large-sized startup. If they have 100, 200, 300 people, they will almost certainly have a training manager as well, and they will almost certainly have this sort of budget as well. So I hope that answers to some degree, and we can go into this in more detail as well. So how does pricing really work? Okay, so there are two basic models. One is per day, right? So when you pitch to a company, you say, or they want you to give them a proposal. So you propose, I'm going to come and teach intro Python for 4 days, and every day, this is how much it's going to cost you. And it doesn't matter how big or small the class is. Typically, you'll say it's, at least 7 people and no more than 16 people. And you can basically play with the numbers as you see fit. By the way, having a cap is very important for 2 reasons. First of all, they might have extra demand. If they have extra demand, this might lead to opening a second course. If you say, oh yeah, sure, I have 25 people, it doesn't really bother me. 25 versus 16 is a big difference, because they might find 20 people and they'll have to open a second course, and will encourage more people to come in and take it. So I've typically priced things per day, and that's the way it tends to work, at least in my experience in Israel. Maybe I'm doing it wrong, but that's the way I've been pricing in Israel. By contrast, and actually in Europe as well, when I just pitched a few courses in Europe that will probably be happening, although I'll only know in December if they're really finalized. But the way it seems to work in the US is per participant, where you say, okay, this is how much it costs per person who's going to be participating in the course, up to a maximum of, say, 20 people. And there, again, the number that I heard, that I found out, that I've even tested and seems to be empirically true, is $300 per person per day. So, you know, a 4-day course is going to be $1,200 per person. And then times 20 people, yeah, that works out to be a lot of money. Anyway, so now how many participants? As I said, you want to limit it to some degree, but you also have to be flexible and reasonable. So I know when I travel to China, they're paying a premium. They're paying me more than they pay the local trainers because I'm a foreigner and I'm an English speaker. And so English speakers get more than local Chinese speakers. Also, they're paying for my flight and they're paying for my hotel. So all that together raises the price. So what do? Well, they bring in more people. And I can't really quibble with that too much, especially since, and this is, again, a very cultural sort of thing, the Chinese students tend to be way, way, way quieter than, say, Israeli students, who are not quiet at all, which means that when I go into a classroom in China, the 25 people, like, it might be more people, but I'm actually getting fewer questions and fewer requests for help than I do in Israel with, say, 10 people. So you have to sort of figure out the cultural issues here also. But I just had earlier this year, I had a company that came to me and asked me to do an advanced Python course for them. And I said, sure, up to 16 people. And they were like, oh, well, we probably have about 20. I said, oh, that's great. You know, can you open a second course? And they did. And so right there, just by having that limit, I was able to basically double my income during that month. Also, every company like asks people if they're going to have people sign up for a course. Well, the people are going to show up, and their division is going to pay, or their boss is going to pay. And to some degree, it's funny money inside the company, but they are actually paying out of a budget, out of this training budget. The thing is, some people will drop out of the course. Almost always, wherever I teach, whatever I teach, I show up and I'm told there'll be 16 people in the course and 14 actually show up. And 2 of them are like, well, you know, I have work, I have this, I have that. And different companies are different. But I've definitely found this also when people are able to, so they don't have to get approval for classes. Then they'll just go click, click, click. Yeah, sure, I'll sign up for that course. And then they don't necessarily show up. So you should not take it personally if people don't show up to your course. You know, it's somewhat limited. I actually do know some people. I thought this was crazy when I first heard it, but it turns out several people I know use assistants or teaching assistants, right? I don't do this. I tend to teach everything myself, but it's an interesting idea. And if your style leads you to use teaching assistants, that's fine. I don't know where you'll find them. I mean, you can find students, you can find professional consultants. Remember, then you'll probably have to pay them. So you have to take that into consideration with your payment as well. I've really never found a need for it, but it's an interesting idea. Okay, so many of these companies, especially if you're dealing with a large company, you will need to be an authorized vendor. And this can be a really annoying process. It's not terrible, but it's just annoying and long and dragged out. They'll ask you for, at least in Israel, they ask me for all sorts of information about my company. They ask me to show them, like, I need to get them bank account information so they can pay me with direct deposit, like a bank transfer. I need to give them a blank check. I need to give them sometimes a letter from my bank saying my actual company. Recently, I had to have a letter from my accountant sent to one company to be an authorized vendor and get paid in a normal way. And this process can take a while. So once you and a company agree that you're going to do training there, then you'll have to go through the authorized vendor process. And it's not too onerous, but it can be annoying, and every company is a little different. And you should find out how you invoice them. For instance, some companies, they love the fact that I email them invoices. Some companies say, no, like, we can't get it there. You'll need to fax it to us. I'm like, really? Fax? And we have some back and forth, and they finally accept email at a certain place. And different countries have different taxing and invoicing requirements. So in Israel, for instance, if I give them what's called a tax receipt, that means I have received the money and I owe VAT on it. I owe sales tax on it. But that means that if I give them the tax receipt and I'm getting paid in 2 months, I owe the taxes now for money I have not received yet. So there are all sorts of things you can do when you can not send it to them, but then they sometimes require it. You're going to need to figure this out, again, with every single company and vendor. Now, in some big companies, once you're an authorized vendor, you can propose anything you want for any price you want, right? You want to do intro Python one day for $1 billion, go ahead and suggest it. It will not get, no one's going to sign up for it because it'll come from their internal budgets. And this means that people can sign up for whatever courses are of interest to them. And whether the course happens then is a matter of whether the course is attractive enough in terms of its name, in terms of its cost. And so, there's always sort of this black box in the middle. If you raise your price by X, is the price to each participant also going up by X or by 2X or by half X or 20th of X, something like that. So you'll need to figure that out. And that's something that just sort of happens over time. But if you can get into one of these internal marketplaces, and if you are offering a technology course that's of interest to a lot of people, it's really hot, then you can just fill up all the time. And that's indeed what's happened with me, with some of my customers, some of my clients, where this is how I've managed to get booked so far in advance. It is possible that some of those bookings will get delayed or get canceled because not enough people will show up. But enough of the time, enough people will show up that I'm not too worried. So what is this proposal I mentioned? So you're going to talk to the training manager. You'll probably talk to a technical person along with the training manager. And then you send them a syllabus. And the syllabus is, what do you want to teach? What's included in the course? And here's the thing. You want the course to be as focused as possible, right? The more focused, the more specific, ironically, the more people are probably going to want to take it, right? Obviously, you don't want to do like, okay, you want to make it focus in some reasonable kind of way that you can teach over the course of 2, 3, 4 days. One-day classes are okay, but I find them sometimes a little watered down. But a focus class allows you to know exactly what you're teaching, them to know what they're getting, and you'll get the right people. Because it often happens that I get people coming to a course, and as I mentioned before, like, I'm going to do the advanced Python course, and yet I have never taken Python before. Why? Because I'm an advanced programmer. You have to explain to them, no, that doesn't matter. People are not going to read the syllabi necessarily, but you want to be able to put in there what the expectations are. And so then, in addition to the syllabus, you have to put in a proposal. And the proposal is typically a simple letter, but sometimes they can require you to fill out a form. How much money do you want? And you can say it's per person, per day. You can say it's a global amount. You can say it's a global amount per day, right? So you can say, I want to charge $5,000 per day for this 4-day course for a total of $20,000. I propose that we do it on the following days. And here are my expectations. When I say expectations, I mean, like, I want a projector, I want a whiteboard, I want you to provide me with lunch. If you're traveling, then you can also say you expect a certain amount for travel and for hotel. Large companies will typically have a standard budget for that. So like one company with whom I'm speaking now said, oh, you're going to do a 4-day course, then that'll be $2,000, and basically this would be in Europe. So basically, if I row a rowboat to Europe and sleep on the streets, I get to pocket to the $2,000. Whereas if I go to a super ridiculously fancy hotel, then I'm out of luck. So again, it depends on the company, it depends how they want to work. Now, there's another kind of course I haven't mentioned so far, which is open enrollment courses. And these open enrollment courses mean it's not on-site at a company. It means, you find a room where you want to have it, or like a lecture hall, and you open it up to anyone who wants to come and pay. Now, here's the good news. You can make a lot more money doing open enrollment courses, a lot more. The bad news is a lot more marketing, a lot more, because you've got to reach out not to one company and negotiate a deal with a training manager. You've got to negotiate a deal with a lot of different companies that might send 2 people or 4 people or 5 people. And then they might say, well, maybe we do, maybe we don't. And then you're negotiating the syllabus with more of them. So it's a lot more complex, but if you can pull it off, it's more money. My goal is actually try to do some open enrollment courses in the coming year. I've taught them before for a training company, but I've never actually done one on my own, although I've started looking into it a little more. So let me talk a little bit, spend another 10 minutes or so talking about learning and teaching, and then hopefully take some questions from you guys, or more questions from you guys. So first of all, I just want to talk a little about what is learning, right? And it seems on the face of it to be such a simple question, and yet it's a really complex question to answer, right? We learn all the time. We like learning all the time, and yet, like, what are we learning? And it's not, absolutely not, a teacher saying things and people absorbing those things. That is the general model for how people think learning works, and it's just not true. Like, it's not true, and it doesn't work that way, right? Even now, I'm talking to you guys. If you absorb 20%, 30% of what I say, then that's considered to be a lot. And like, we just know people don't work that way. So there's been a lot of research, a lot of thought into what learning is. I want to introduce you to some of the big names and ideas in that. So one of them, perhaps like the most famous, I'm sorry, I'm just going to get cramp in my muscles here. One of the most famous names in educational psychology and education research is Piaget, Jean Piaget, who was a mathematician, and he thought a lot about how we construct knowledge. And he thought of something called constructivism. He basically said people do not absorb knowledge from others. So when I am talking to you now, you are not just like receiving and absorbing the knowledge I'm giving you. Rather, Piaget's theory was people have to construct their own knowledge, meaning I talk, you're listening, you're breaking it apart, you're putting it back together, and you're constructing it in ways that you understand, which might be different than the way that I'm saying it. So how does this affect learning at all? Well, it means We want to put people in situations where they are constantly forced to construct knowledge, where they're forced to make mistakes and be frustrated, and use those frustrations to regenerate and create new kinds of knowledge and reorganize the knowledge they have. So you want to be experimenting, you want to be trying things, you want to be failing even, because that's through failure you're going to learn lots of stuff. And a classroom, I call it controlled frustration, right? It's frustration, but you know it's temporary and you know that there is an answer. Although I must admit I have sometimes given assignments that were impossible to solve by mistake. I try to avoid that as much as possible. And so you want them constantly be playing and with things. So there's another guy named Vygotsky who he saw learning as a social activity, not just something that you're constructing knowledge, but you work with other people. And you can learn more by working with other people. And there are people who have built on this theory on and on. I'll certainly talk about it in the book and maybe future webinars. So the idea is you can learn more from working with other people than not. Now, I know this seems ridiculously obvious. Like, duh, of course you can learn more with others. But he described them what's called the zone of proximal development. And the idea is, let's say you try to learn something on your own. All right, you're going to get to a certain place. And let's say I help you to learn something. You're going to go farther. At least if I'm a good teacher, you're going to go farther. What is that delta? What is that difference? That's the ZPD. And so when I'm teaching, I'm trying to think of like, what are the maximum places that I can give people value that they could not get to on their own, right? So basic syntax of a programming language, they can learn on their own. I don't want to dwell on the syntax, but the ideas of how to use it and why the syntax works that way and what the implications are, that they're probably not going to be able to figure out on their own so easily. And those insights are where I really try to bring in my teaching. Now, Papert, Seymour Papert, I must say he was my advisor's advisor. For my PhD, no surprise, I'm a big fan of his and his work. And he was a student of Piaget. And he said, okay, Piaget came up with this constructivism idea that people construct their own knowledge. Papert came up with what's called constructionism, meaning one of the best ways to learn is by creating things. You create artifacts that are meaningful to you, and then you share them with other people. In fact, my dissertation was a lot about this, a lot about creating software that allowed people to create and share with others. So the basic idea then is learn by building things and making mistakes along the way. Papert is a big fan of learning to debug, learning to make mistakes and undoing your mistakes. And you sort of find the corners in a system and learn it really well that way. So now Papert is a big fan then, not surprisingly, of project-based learning in which the student chooses the project. Choose something, build it, run with it. Right, and work on it maybe for a long time. Papert, by the way, for those of you who don't know, is the inventor of the Logo programming language, which some of us learned when we were in elementary school. It's a fantastic language. It was designed for kids to play with programming and through it learn math. And how would they learn math? Because they would try to draw shapes and they would try to do calculations. And it's not just turtle graphics. For those of you who know Logo, the Logo is actually a serious language. But by playing with Logo, you would be exposed to the world of math and thus learn it pretty well. So how do we integrate this theory into our teaching? So Piaget and Papert really influenced me to encourage lots of experimenting. And so in my classes, always, I'm doing live coding all the time. And the reason I'm doing that live coding is not only because I find it interesting and fun and a good way to learn, but I'm trying to model behavior. I want my students, when they're done, when they're sitting in front of their desks, frustrated something doesn't work, to say, how can I fix this? I know. I'm going to do some experiments in the REPL, in the read eval print loop, in the interactive Python shell or interactive Ruby shell, and so forth. Try it out. Know that this is a good established way to test your theories. And in testing your theories, you're being very Piagetian. And in creating your software, right, which is your project, you're being very constructionist. And again, as I said before, I try to think of Vygotsky in terms of where can I maximize that ZPD benefit. Now, I have not tried constructionist projects in my classes. I would love to. In theory, I think it would be a fantastic thing. But I just don't think in a 4-day course there's time to do it as much as I would love to. But some of these hacker schools, some of these places where you go for a month or two to learn how to program, they totally do this. And they have been very successful because you're working on something you care about, that you love. You're working on a new web application. You want it to work. And so you're going to work on it. And you're going to learn so much along the way because things won't work. And you'll need to check on it. You'll need to think about it, and so on and so forth. Okay, let's talk a little bit about, for lack of a better term, data structures of the mind. How do people think? How do people store this knowledge? And I should say, no one has any definitive clue as to how this stuff works, but this is how we think of it. And we're not talking biologically, we're talking sort of mentally, where mentally is like the software and biologically would be the hardware. So Mental models, I think, are crucial. And this is something that I constantly think about. How can I give people a clear mental model of how something works in software? Classic example is thermostats. People are convinced that if it's cold in a room and they want to make it hot, and they want to make it hot really fast, they turn up the heat really high. And that has no effect on things whatsoever. Why? Because the thermostat only opens the heat or closes the heat. And so when you set to a really high temperature, it'll just keep the heat open for longer. And so people, once they get a mental model of how a thermostat works, they're very surprised, but then they understand why things are working the way they're working. And I do this all the time in my classes. I want to make sure they understand data structures or scoping rules or database transactions, or how Git has things in a tree structure. Oh, excuse me. And so these mental models are crucial, and that's actually a lot of what I write on my blog. How can we give people a clear mental model of what's going on, of how a function works, of how transactions work, so that when they encounter an issue or when they're trying to plan things, they can clearly plan for it based on actual knowledge and understanding. Another thing to think about is schemas. Schemas are a little hard to describe, I'd say, at least from my perspective, but it's like a standard paradigm or template for how we think, in which we're familiar. So like there's the I don't know, for lack of a better term, there's the Shakespearean play schema. We know how many acts it's going to be. We know roughly what's going to happen if there's a tragedy. We know everyone's going to die except for one person, and so on and so forth. And so schemas allow us to sort of stereotype the world. Well, programmers are familiar with certain kinds of data structures and algorithms, so you can build on these. If there's an existing schema, and you can say, oh, this is just like that, except you're going a long way toward helping them to understand. Now, Marvin Minsky, who's a famous professor at MIT, came up with something called the Society of Mind. And he talks about knowledge in pieces. I'm mixing up here actually a little bit of what another guy, Andy DeSessa, writes about with his what's called P-prims. But the idea is knowledge in pieces. People used to think, and there are many people who still think, you have your conception of how things work. And if I'm going to teach you a new conception, we have to break apart your old one and replace it with a new one. Basically beat you over the head so that you don't have these bad conceptions anymore. Or prove it to you by showing you things. And Minsky basically says, no, that's not how it works. You can't like do that. What you need to is sort of rejigger where these pieces are and how they are, how they combine in different ways. And then you get new pieces of information. Oh, sorry, guys. So what this means is don't go to people and say, you are wrong, your conception is wrong. What you want to do is use the knowledge they have, which is probably the right knowledge or mostly the right knowledge, just not associated in the right way. So take what they know and rejigger it. So if you know several programming languages and you're teaching programming, you definitely want to use other languages to compare and contrast, because it'll help to put the information in place. Here's a last sort of theoretical thing, and then I think we'll sum up. Metacognition. One of the things that is found to help people the most is metacognition, meaning thinking about thinking. When I am learning something, if I think about how I'm learning it, if I talk to others about how I'm learning it, then that will help me to retain it better and use it in more situations, what's called transfer. And so what you want to do is be forcing people to think about what they're doing and to talk about it. And pair programming then, I think one of the reasons why it's so powerful is that pair programming forces you to talk to someone else to describe what you're thinking. And that forces you to go through this metacognitive process, which helps with your learning and your retention and your deeper understanding. What else? Oh, I guess one last thing is exercises. Companies will often ask me, how many exercises do I include? And the approximate number I give them is about 30%. I try to stay at about that, although it's hard. It's hard to determine that in advance. People have more questions, less questions, do exercises faster. But the more exercises you do, the better. I've found over the last few years, I've reduced the scope of a number of my courses and I've increased the number of exercises. People are happy. They want to do these exercises. They will learn more, in part because it's very constructivist constructionist. They'll actually like the class more. I found that my ratings have gone up dramatically since I added more exercises. And here's the funny thing, you don't have to lecture as much. Now, you will probably have to run around the room helping people, but it's a different sort of thing. Now, the key rule for exercises is only rely on what you've covered so far. I used to make the mistake of giving exercise that required writing a function before I taught people how to write functions. So people with previous experience were way ahead and they could do the exercise. It was a bad problem. So now I really try to come up with exercises that only are based on what we've done so far, obvious as that might sound. You want to force choices upon people. You want to force them to think about which data structure do I use here and what kinds of functions, what kind of function parameters. You want to force them to integrate things. So if you've just been talking about strings and now you're talking about lists and now you're talking about dictionaries, You want to give them an exercise that will force them to decide among these and then integrate them as well. Maybe you want a list of dictionaries. And I love using corner cases in exercises, actually in demos in general, because I find that it helps to sharpen the mental models that people have. Okay, I think I've done enough stuff here. I've covered, I think, a lot of different topics. I would love to know if you guys have any questions or comments, or if I can help you at all. That's sort of the end of the formal part of this webinar. I would also love to know if this was helpful, if this was interesting or useful. Again, this is the first time I'm talking about this. You could call this like a metacognitive process for training. But as I move more and more into helping trainers and spread the word that training can and should be an interesting craft, I want to get as much feedback as possible from people. So I see there's still a few people in the chat here. I would love to hear and see what you think, what questions you have, or how you might be able to, use this. Yeah. Oh, so here's a question, right? So Derek asked, how do you create exercises that are effective but not contrived? How do you determine if it's the right length? So first of all, there's definitely trial and error involved. No question about it. My exercises have all gone through an evolutionary process where I've added some things, I've removed some things, I've changed the way I describe things. Some of them, like, sometimes I'll try something and it'll be a fantastic hit right away. And usually it needs a whole bunch of things. So first of all, I usually try to do like a few lectures, like let's say half an hour of lecturing and discussion, and then an exercise. So as I said, a typical day will probably have like, 2, 3, 4 exercises. I try to make the exercises, and this again comes with sort of trial and error and a little bit of experience. I try to make it so it'll take between 10 and 20 minutes per exercise. I like these exercises that force people to think, that force them to sort of just sweat a little bit or even a lot. Sometimes I'm totally off and it takes people 30 seconds or a minute. Oh, okay, great, Doug. I love everybody. So, so sometimes, I totally am off. And so I'll try to make the exercise a little harder. Or if it's too long, I'll make it easier. And I'll sort of see if people are struggling. Also, if you have a very, very heterogeneous class, then it's really going to be hard to give an exercise that everyone's going to take the same amount of time on. And depending on where you are, it's a cultural thing, knowing to figure out, sort of to figure out how many people have finished. And so often, like, take the temperature. Who here is finished? I've toyed with the idea of saying to people, if you're done, just email it to me. And then I can look it over and see what people are doing as well. But that just seems like extra overhead for me than actually, quite frankly, in terms of reading email and going over. Although I have actually thought about, showing people's exercise or having them come up and present it. That's a very constructionist kind of thing to do, right? Have 2 or 3 people come up and show how they solve the problem. I'll tell you, I would love to do that, but I feel like it would just take too much time. And part of me just really, really wants to see it happen. Now, how do I determine if it's the right length? Again, I try. And I know there are 2 exercises in particular, 3 exercises in particular that I give people that I know are long, that will take like an hour or so to do. And those I warn people, I say, we're not going to do a really long exercise. It's going to be hard, but it integrates a lot of the knowledge. And again, I sometimes adjust it. I used to, for instance, I have this, my favorite exercise by far is this one in which people have a zoo. So they have to put animals in cages in the zoo and then produce a bunch of reports about it. It's a little more complex than that. Anyway, I used to just have them like use strings for the animals. And I said, you know what? People need to practice inheritance more. And so I added inheritance to it. And it's definitely made the exercise harder. It takes people longer, but I think they get more out of it. Okay, let's see. Does it make sense to get a degree in teaching, or is that overkill? I don't think there's a good answer to that. Maybe, but look, teaching degrees. So I TA'd when I was doing my PhD 1 quarter, 2 quarters for a master's in education. These were teachers who were coming in to learn. I don't know. I don't think they're going to teach you that much. But it probably depends hugely on the program. It depends on you and your background. There are people who are gifted teachers and never had to learn it at all. I would say, a degree in teaching will force you to learn to plan lessons, learn to think about learning goals. So it's sort of like, I'm very good at making fun of MBAs, in part because I think a lot of an MBA, from what I understand, is things that someone who's really good at managing probably knows how to do, and other people have to be taught how to do. So it could be that a degree in teaching would help, although it seems to me like degree in teaching for technical training, if you think it'll help you, then great, but probably no one else is going to care. Degree in psychology, 23 years of developing, do tech talks really high level. Look, I should have read that, I guess, in addition. Look, so I spoke with the training manager at Cisco in Shanghai like 2 months ago. I mean, I do a lot of work with Cisco. I was in Shanghai. Great opportunity to meet him. Maybe something will happen, maybe not. And so he complained to me that there are a lot of trainers who are great teachers and don't know how to develop. And there are a lot of people who are great developers and don't know how to teach. So any experience you can get in teaching and speaking is fantastic, but they're looking for people who are good at both, who tend to be rare, right? Because you're combining two skills that neither group, like teachers don't tend to learn programming, programmers don't tend to learn teaching. Okay, do you plan for any homework during those 4 days? This is something that I've spoken to other trainers about, and there just seems to be a difference of opinion here. I refuse to give homework. Absolutely positively refuse to give homework. And that's for two reasons. One selfish and one not. The selfish reason is, oh my God, if I give them homework, then we're gonna come the next time, we have to review it. And I don't know, I'd rather have them in class, be able to ask me questions, go over and everything. And I realize that means using more class time for something that we could use for something else. But I mean, my classes tend to be kind of fast-paced anyway, and I see the exercises as a bit of a rest, right? Like, yeah, you're working hard, but it's hard to listen to me talk all the time. Just ask my children, right? And so I tend not to give homework. I definitely know people though who give homework, and they say, yeah, I'll give them exercises to do or reading to do between now and the next thing. There's also an idea of what's called like a flipped classroom, where so a typical class is I come and I lecture, and then you go home and you do your homework. So the flipped classroom is I tell you to watch certain video lectures or read certain things, and then you come in and in class you're just doing exercises. I know one of my like people doing my coaching program is trying that to some degree, not completely, but to some degree, and I'm really curious to see how it works, because I don't think it could work at a company also, right? Think of it. You got these people coming, 8 hours a day to work. They're going to a training course. Now you're going to tell them, oh, by the way, not only have you not done your work that you're probably going to have to make up for in the evening that your boss is upset about, but you're also going to have homework and you can't see your family. I just don't see that as reasonable. But again, other people do it. All right, let me just take a drink of tea and I'll answer more questions. This is great. So is there a general structure process for building a syllabus? Taking my knowledge and forming it into a class seems daunting. Yeah, so it takes time. It takes time to figure out how to do it, and I'm constantly improving it. So I'll tell you, I tend to say, okay, what do I want to teach someone, right? So let's take this regular expressions course that I started teaching recently. I need to come up with a syllabus for it. So I said, okay, what are the different things people need to know in regular expressions? And I already taught regex before, but this was like a full 2-day course. It was supposed to be much bigger and much more detailed. And part of the reason why I proposed this course is that I was trying to teach regular expressions like 2 or 3 hours. And it was just a complete failure. People who knew them were bored. People kind of knew them, got a little bit out of it. People did not know them. Their eyes just glazed over. They had no idea what I was talking about. It was clear they needed much more time. So I said, okay, what do people need to learn regular expressions? I wrote down sort of all the meta characters and all the techniques. I looked on Stack Overflow. I was like, what are the questions that people tend to ask? And I try to take those questions, go up to a higher level, say, okay, what categories of things can I give them? And I put into a syllabus. I was like, well, this can go here, this can go there, here. And so my syllabus tends to be an outline. And you can look, if you go to my website, learner.co.il, you'll see some of the syllabi that I offer for my courses. And those have changed over time. And they'll probably continue to change over time as I rejigger how I do them. So this is one of the things that I want to think about, though, like, my own metacognition in writing this book is, what is the process for taking things and turning into a syllabus? I also tend to try to start with basics and dig deep into those basics. So like people come to my my classes, especially like my Python classes, sometimes they'll roll their eyes at the fact that we're going to spend a day or so on data structures. They're like, oh, I know what a list is. I know what a dictionary is, like a hash table is. But then we try to go deep and where to use it and why to use it. And that tends to be more interesting and more important. So you want to sort of find a little bit of syntax and then get the 30,000-foot view. I hope that's helpful. So how do you be excellent right off the bat? You don't. Like, it's a great question, Doug. Look, I am sure if I were to get into a time machine and go back 5 years or even 2 years and look at my classes, even though my classes were getting high ratings, I would be cringing at the things that I said, and I would be cringing at like the low-level detail that I used and like what was going on there. For example, like one favorite example of mine is I love now, okay, I'm kind of crazy about this. I love talking about variable scoping rules in Python. When is it a local variable? When is it a global variable? How can we mess with that? I never used to talk about it. It was just not on my syllabus at all. It was not on my radar at all because I said, oh, it's so obvious. And then I saw, then I saw like people had no idea what was going on. They were getting they were having problems understanding what happened. So I started to include it. And like now that's actually one of my favorite parts of the course. Okay. Questions from other people. I'm happy to keep going. But I think we sort of maxed out the questions. I'll give you a few more moments, like type. If anyone has more things they want to type quickly. Oh, I'll tell you actually, look, I'm just going to turn on my fan for a moment and then I'll say this. Okay, there we go. Yes, it's Israel. So even though it's 2 in the morning in Israel in mid-October, we still have to use electric fans. So look, I was forced to learn to touch type when I was in high school. My parents forced me to learn. It is one of the best skills I've ever learned, and especially when teaching, it is huge. It is fantastic because it means that I can go and I can live code, right? And I can say, well, what if I write my function this way, blah, 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 blah. And what if I write my class this way, blah, 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 blah. And the speed with which I can type is a huge, I would say, competitive advantage against people who can type more slowly or don't do live coding. So I definitely encourage that. I put together a mastermind group of technical trainers together. Is this a good idea or short-sighted as their competition? Doug, good question. Look, right. So what am I doing now? I'm putting together coaching for technical trainers. I'm putting together a book for technical trainers. I'm trying to do this conference for technical trainers in a number of months. Probably I'm going to do a podcast for them. Look, there is so much work out there. I'm so not worried about competition. I do a lot of training at Cisco. I do a lot of Python training at Cisco. They basically, are, I don't know, a good, very like more than half easily of my work over the next year. And sometimes I'll show up and there's someone else on the same day teaching a Python class. And I'm not worried because like, they're just so many people in this company and people can take my class and their class or their class and my class. Like the way these companies work, you can take basically 2 different classes, even if they're on the same subject, crazy as it sounds. So I'm just not worried about competition because there's so much work to be done out there. Look, I mean, I just met someone in the last few days. I can't remember who does Git training, and I do Git training. All right, fine. You know what? If I am full with work and I can sell my books and sell my coaching and sell my other stuff, then like that's fine. And there's plenty to go around. So I would not worry about it in the slightest. If you're worried about it a little bit, then maybe try like making them remote, right? So don't have anyone from your city, but really like there's just so much work to go around. And there's part of the thing with training is you are doing it. And so we are spending certain amounts of time, right? And there's a limited amount of time that you can actually spend. So unless you're planning to also clone yourself or put together a training company, right? That's when things get a little complex. Because if I have a stable of, I don't know, 100 trainers, 50 trainers, even 5 trainers working for me, then I might be a little more hesitant to have something. But I'm in a mastermind every Friday morning with other consultants. I'm the only one really doing training. Although no, one of the others is doing training. We sort of bounce ideas off of each other. But I'm not worried about competition at all. Yeah, groups, masterminds are fantastic. I definitely encourage them. Tell you what, if there are any more questions, I'd be happy to answer those. And if not, then I think we will wrap this up. And feedback would be, of course, fantastic. And I will definitely be doing more of these podcasts, writing the whole 9 yards. All right, I'll give the hangout a little bit longer to let people type. If you touch type, if you touch type, you'd be done writing your question by now. All right, guys. I think I'm going to sign off then. Thank you so much for participating. I would love to get feedback. I'm going to put this is going to go on YouTube so other people can see it there too. I'll mention my newsletter. Pluralsight course. Oh, well. Oh, wow. This is going to go on YouTube. I'll tell you though. Interesting point. Look, I have been very reluctant to do recorded courses. And the reason is I love the interactions with people. I thrive on it. And so doing something recorded where I'm not getting feedback from people is sort of hard for me. I've done it for my book. I've got for my Python book. I I'm recording these screencasts, and I find it a little hard to do just because I'm not getting feedback. But we'll see. We'll see. Maybe I will do that. Anyway, thank you guys so much for participating. I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I look forward to being in touch in the near future. And meanwhile, have a good day or night, whatever it is for you. All right. Bye, everyone.